Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. Normally, I'm your co host, Mike, but tonight I'm just your host, Mike. John is busy paying the rent on tour, doing the Lord's work, and just dominating the way he does. So we wish him the best. He will be on the. So this is kind of a first thoughts about rivalry week. And you'll have to excuse me. My voice is toast as I lost it screaming at the Minnesota Golden Gopher football game yesterday. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all of rivalry week to some extent, but it's just going to be my first thoughts on everything. And also your thoughts. I encourage you to, go in the chat or whatever, and please interact. I'm happy to read anything you say that's, as long as it's not offensive or so far off topic. You can get off topic, but not like in a weird way. Don't make it weird. Like, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about in the chat. Just don't, let's not make it weird. Let's stick largely to college football. And if you go personal, that's okay too. Just, keep it within the realm of this kind of show. Oh, friend of the pod and the legend himself, Scooby, says hello. Scooby, good to have you in the chat, my man. I appreciate that because Scooby's a busy man. He's got a family. I know this time of night is probably around bedtime. So appreciate him coming to kick in the chat, and curious about your thoughts. Pat Fitzgerald. So let's start off with the elephant in the room. Michigan State. The Michigan State Spartans have hired Pat Fitzgerald as their next head coach. So that's crazy news. That is the last thing. The kids are watching. I love that for Scooby. That's good. Well, I will make sure not to slip and use any foul language. Not that we do on the show anyway. We generally don't curse on this show. We try not to. There are better ways to express ourselves than that most of the time, I would say. Not saying I never curse, but not on the podcast. There's a time and a place for it. Absolutely. So, yeah, Pat Fitzgerald hired by Michigan State. I think this is a shocking development because, as you know, Pat Fitzgerald was fired by Northwestern for a hazing scandal. But, of course, in court, it came out that he actually didn't have knowledge of the hazing and was not connected to it in a meaningful way. So he won. But the question is, he's been out of coaching now a few years. He hasn't been here for kind of the new reality of NIL, the way it's been the last, in the modern, there was NIL the first couple of years. Now there's kind of what NIL has become now. I think those are kind of two different things. So the question is how, but Pat Fitzgerald has kept himself close to the game. He's close to the Iowa program. He's been close to the Northwestern program. So he's got his ear to the ground. The question is, can he adjust to this new era? And what I would say about Pat Fitzgerald is he was phenomenally successful at Northwestern, the best coach they've had in modern times, for sure. No question about it. But that success took place with a guy named Mike Hankwitz as his defensive coordinator. When Mike Hankwitz retired, Pat Fitzgerald stopped winning at Northwestern, full stop. So to me, Pat Fitzgerald can win, but I think the way Pat Fitzgerald wants to win, he wants to run the ball. He wants to play defense. He wants to play field position. Look, there's a reason you saw him hanging out with Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa program. It's because Pat Fitzgerald, at his heart, is an Iowa kind of coach. That's how he wants to win games. So, can he find the right defensive coordinator? Because that's what it's all about, I think, for Pat Fitzgerald. I think offensively, he's going to do what he does. He's going to run the ball. He's going to try to grind clock. He's going to, try to out-tough you, stuff like that, and see if he can be successful that way. He wasn't always at Northwestern, but he tried his best. And then, defensively, they, again, under Hankwitz, they were fantastic. After that, they kind of fell off a cliff a little bit. So, Scooby, I'm super curious. What do you think? And anybody else in the chat, I'm extra curious what you think about the Pat Fitzgerald hire at Michigan State. I think it could go either way. I think it could be a home run hire. He could be, if he gets the right defensive coordinator, the right offensive personnel, he can recruit better, certainly. at Michigan State than he was ever able to recruit at Northwestern. There's a higher ceiling that way there. So you can sell it to me that way, that Pat Fitzgerald now has a little more to work with than he had at Northwestern. So if he had all that success at Northwestern the way it was, maybe with more resources, maybe he can have even more success. I think if you're saying this is a good hire, I think that's the case you're making. Scooby says, I look at this hire two ways. A, Michigan State has some of the part, does some of this for this run first offense. So yeah, they have some of the parts, for this run first offense. Yeah, totally. I could see that Michigan State has some parts for it. I think their offensive line needs to be a little better if they're going to be a run first team, but they've got some pieces. It's interesting because they just made the quarterback switch. So you got to think that Aiden Childs, with Jonathan Smith first benching him and then getting fired, I got to imagine Aiden Childs is out of there. So can Sparty hold on to Milivojevic? Do they even want to? Will Pat Fitzgerald have another quarterback in mind? That'll all remain to be seen as we go forward here. So I'm really curious. I thought maybe Pat Fitzgerald would make it back to the Big Ten, but I didn't think it would be as a head coach this soon. I think it's, good for Sparty. It's a tough coaching cycle to find a good qualified head coach. So I think they're thinking Pat Fitzgerald's just sitting there. He's had the success he's had. Why not give him a shot? Like, I get that. And maybe it shows that Michigan State is returning to their Mark D'Antonio kind of roots, where they were a school that recruited like high 3-star and like a handful of 4-star guys. And then they played kind of above their, where the sum was, where the sum of the whole, where the whole was greater than the sum of the parts kind of thing. So I could see that, that working out. I could also see it, Pat Fitzgerald being totally divorced from what today's reality requires and crashing and burning. I don't know. And then, Michigan State could be back here in a couple of years, because Sparty, they don't give you 3 years, man. You don't get 3 years in Michigan State. You get 2 years. That's it. Mel Tucker got 2 years, got fired for being a creep. He deserved to be fired and should have been. Jonathan Smith was not a creep. Alleged. I mean, I haven't heard any allegation that he was. And he got fired after 2 years. 2 years. Not 3. Not the 3 you normally get to put your whole position, to put your whole regime into place and whatever. Just not exist anymore. Michigan State thinks that they can know after 2 years that he wasn't ready. I don't know. I personally would have given Jonathan Smith another year. I think he showed, I mean, they weren't great this year, but I think they showed some improvements, especially as the year went on. And I don't know if changing the coach now is the best move, but if you think Pat Fitzgerald still has that magic, then I get it. And who knows, maybe he does. It's totally possible he does and is able to get that done. In the chat, saying NIL will be interesting to see. Iowa isn't the program to pick up good NIL habits. Yeah, that's true. That is true. And no worries about the spelling. I'm not concerned about that. I know what you mean. Scooby, another thing to consider, how does Fitzgerald handle a boisterous fan base like Michigan State? And that's a legit question, Scooby, because Pat Fitzgerald is used to a fan base that is a small fan base that didn't ask much of him. He more than delivered by being Mr. Northwestern, by being the big alumni guy. He more than delivered everything that Northwestern fans wanted from Pat Fitzgerald. He gave them the things that they were looking for. Will he be willing to be a little more brash, to put himself out there a little more, to, maybe guarantee that they're going to make the playoff in, a certain amount of years or something like that? I don't know. Is Pat Fitzgerald going to embrace that or not? That's a really good question, Scooby. I'm not sure, because Michigan State is, Michigan State, I get it. Like, they feel underappreciated always because they live in Michigan's shadow. They share a border with them. They live in Michigan's shadow. That's just kind of the way it is. And they definitely don't get the credit they deserve, even when they are really good. So I get that there is a kind of a complex at Michigan State about that, and they need the right coach who can break that and, do what D'Antonio did, was carve out their own niche, their own identity. For D'Antonio, it was a physical, defensive, our defensive backs and defensive linemen are just tougher than you and better than you kind of thing. And, whatever your identity is, you have to make it your own. You need to recruit to it and prove to recruits in advance that it works. And that's what D'Antonio was able to do. And that's what Pat Fitzgerald is going to have to do. And he's going to have to figure out the NIL thing, because you cannot survive without NIL in this day and age, and not at a school like Michigan State. It's not like Northwestern, where you're asking a handful of people for a bunch of money. Like at Michigan State, there's a bigger group of people you need to please and get them to give up their money. Max in the chat, Max Geitman says, I'm here finally. Good to see you, Max. And we got Briggs of Disaster in the chat, and all he says is axe. Just the axe emoji. And I think that does say it all. Does it not, my man? The axe emoji. We'll get to that. We'll get to Minnesota's dominant victory over Wisconsin. It was a glorious day yesterday at the bank. It was a whole vibe. We will talk about that absolutely as we go on. Max says Sparty's a tough spot to coach. D'Antonio did so much. Yeah. I think, what I think the problem with Sparty is, and John and I have talked about this on the show before. Michigan State thinks it's Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan. Michigan State thinks it's a helmet school, and it's not. Michigan State is closer to being Iowa than it is to being Penn State. And at its best, Michigan State, the way they recruit, their recruiting profile, their ceiling, all that kind of stuff is going to correlate, at least at this juncture, is going to correlate closer to an Iowa than it is a Penn State. And until they need to accept that fact, or they need to find a couple billionaires who are going to fund them at the level that they think they should be at. And that's kind of just the reality of where they are for the time being. And yeah, D'Antonio did so much. D'Antonio did a lot, Max. Mark D'Antonio won a Big Ten title. He made a 4-team playoff. He finished in the top, I think it was the top 5, several years in the top 5, the AP top 5. Just had a remarkable run at Michigan State. Had a couple bad years, and he got fired. And it was the biggest mistake I think Michigan State ever made. Because Mark D'Antonio, I think, he decided to retire at that point, but I think he could have, the way Kirk Ferentz has had a second act after his act got stale for a few years, but Iowa stuck with him. And he's come back in that last 10 years and had a phenomenal run. Excuse me. I think D'Antonio could have done that if he had had the chance. I do. I think that he got absolutely hosed out of that. All right, in the chat, Briggs says, had D'Antonio stayed longer, it could have become a Penn State type program, or at least come close. I agree. They were winning more than Penn State, Briggs. They were. I mean, flat out. They were beating Penn State head-to-head, all that kind of stuff. So if D'Antonio had time to sustain it, and that's the thing, Michigan State never sustains it. They never have the coach who's there long term, at least in modern times. And when they do have a coach for a longer amount of time, often it's a guy who, has his ups and his downs. So, before D'Antonio, it was John L. Smith. And I feel like most Michigan State coaches have been a lot closer to John L. Smith than they have been to Mark D'Antonio. But maybe Fitzgerald, can do that. Maybe with like I said, with a few more resources, he'll be able to get that job done. I'd be curious to find, man. It's going to be so interesting to see whom he hires on his staff, because he's had a few years away from college football now. He's had time to study. He's had time to work on relationships and focus just on relationship building and all that stuff, networking, all those kinds of things. So what kind of budget does Michigan State give him for assistant coaches? And who's he able to pluck out there? Who's he able to take from, this guy, this recruiting coordinator, and this defensive coordinator, and this wide receivers coach? What's that going to look like for a guy in Pat Fitzgerald? Maybe it helps. Maybe it gives him a fresh look, and he's able to look at, to make a better decision than he was making towards the end of his tenure. Make better decisions than he was making towards the end of his tenure at Northwestern. Max, it's going to be so weird seeing Fitz in green. Yeah, man. Coaches are mercenaries, man. They work for paychecks, not for colors. So it is strange to see. Scooby says the issue with D'Antonio, in the end, he tried to jump to the next tier and that bit him. A lot of his kids got into trouble and kicked out in recruiting. And that's true. D'Antonio, again, but what does that speak to, Scooby? D'Antonio, when he started getting a lot of 4-stars, he kind of got the wrong 4-stars and got guys who were troublemakers, as Scooby said, who didn't end up producing on the field up to their recruiting rankings. So, again, they were almost trying to be something that they weren't. And it's like, there's nothing wrong. There's certainly nothing wrong with doing what Mark D'Antonio was doing, which was winning 10, 11, 12 games a year. Every year. There was nothing really wrong with that. And they thought there was. And there was more meat on the bone. And they've been proven wrong in that a couple times. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of success Pat Fitzgerald has, but also, what kind of leash does he have? What does Michigan State think it is? What does it expect to be? And what is going to be tolerated there and not tolerated there? I'm really curious. Because what I see, again, is a school that thinks it's a Penn State, but is really more of an Iowa. And right now it's not even close to Iowa standards. So they've got a lot to figure out. It'll be interesting. Fun to have Pat Fitzgerald back in the Big Ten. He always said at his press conferences, he just gave a simple "Go Cats." So it'll be interesting to see, what does he say here? Does he say Spartans? Does he say just go green? Go green? I could see that. I don't know. What is Pat Fitzgerald's sign off going to be? It was always "Go Cats." In his interviews at Northwestern, what's he going to say? I don't know. What kind of success is he going to have? All that kind of stuff. I am curious. Go Sparty? Maybe something new. Sparty on or something. Ooh, I like that. That's close to party on, but it's with Sparty. I think that's fun. If you're not already doing that, Michigan State, you should be doing that. Sparty on. Make that a thing. Make that a thing. All right, Briggs. Funny how often that happens when 9 to 10 wins a season just isn't enough in the new landscape of college football. I have to imagine that mindset will have to change. Yeah, it will. It will, Briggs, because if you don't change that, if you don't change the attitude and adjust to the new reality where there are going to be some bad seasons, and 8-4 is going to happen sometimes, even if you have a lot of talent. Because you're just playing really tough schedules. If you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're just playing really tough schedules. And that's just the reality of the situation. You have to adjust your expectations accordingly. Max says, Buckeyes look like a number 1 team this weekend. I know we talking about Fitz and Sparty, but still. No, let's talk. Let's talk rivalry week. Oh, Max, you just said what I wanted to hear, because I am ready to talk rivalry week. Absolutely ready for it. Let's talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, this is a game I have to go back and watch this in greater detail. I watched a decent amount of the extended highlights and stuff like that. But this is a game that, I had company in town. I finally have this house. I had company in town, and my buddy and his girlfriend were staying here to go to the Gopher game. So we did that. So because of that, they wanted to tailgate. So I ended up tailgating a little bit. And so I ended up watching a little bit at the tailgate, but not quite as much as I wanted to be. So I am really curious, Max, what you thought, or any of you in the chat, what you thought of the Buckeyes and their performance. Let's get right into it. The Ohio State, number 1 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. The Ohio State Buckeyes, 27. The number 15 ranked Michigan Wolverines, 9. Once again, Ohio State holds an opposing team to single digits. Single digits. They've been doing it all year. I think other than Illinois, did anyone else score 10 points on Ohio State all year other than Illinois? I'm not sure anyone did. And that's bananas. Like, absolutely, totally bananas. I know that, the receivers looked great from what I heard. Carnell Tate was just a demon. And, Jeremiah Smith did some Jeremiah Smith things. And Julian Sayin threw an interception. So that wasn't great. Michigan was running well early. So that wasn't great. But, they kept playing and they adjusted. And obviously Michigan stopped having success because, they got blanked later in the game. If you look at this one, it was Michigan State scored all of its points in the first half. Or sorry, Michigan. Sorry, not Michigan State. Michigan scored all of its points in the first half, all 9. 6 points in the first quarter, 3 in the second quarter, nothing after that. So they started out well in the first quarter, but couldn't get touchdowns when they needed to get touchdowns. The second quarter, it didn't go quite as well. In the third and fourth quarter, they got nothing, because that is the 2025 Ohio State Buckeyes defense. You get nothing. Caleb Downs is the best safety in the country. They have playmakers all over the defense at all 3 levels. They have speed just like you wouldn't even believe everywhere. Max says Ohio State was doing it effortlessly too. Day and Hartline still haven't even shown anywhere close to the bottom of the playbook. Defense was great once again. Arvell Reese is a demon. Yeah, dude. Arvell Reese is a really good story. Really good story. That's a guy who's hung around, and just become an absolute terror out there. So that's good to hear. Scooby says it really wasn't close. Max calling out Michigan. All right. It's been 4 years since you got a rivalry win. You got it now, Max. You call them out. And I will encourage this level of petty. Winning the game and then still complaining. That is the kind of petty that I, as a college football fan, absolutely encourage. So he says, classless Michigan trying to fight all game. Day showed class, told his players not to plant a flag after the game. Yeah, no, you can't be flag planting anymore. I think that part of the rivalry had to end. And I'm glad it did. Glad that's not a thing that we have to worry about anymore. Max, first team since 1975 to hold everyone under 17 all season. I mean, that's amazing. First since 1975. That was 50 years ago. So, yeah, this Buckeye defense is not just a great defense for this year in college football. This is a historically great Buckeye defense. And if Matt Patricia doesn't win the Broyles Award for the best assistant, then something's wrong. Something's wrong, because this Buckeye defense is the best unit, offense or defensive, in the country, in my opinion. Michigan had -8 rushing yards in the second half. Michigan, there you go. Michigan ran in the first half. The Buckeyes adjusted at half. Second half, they got nothing. Less than nothing. -8. Briggs, got to head out. Keep up the good work. Another great season in the Big Ten. Now let's bring another championship to the conference. I'm with you, Briggs. I hope you have a good one. Thanks for swinging by. Appreciate you showing up in the chat as always. I think, the Big Ten has a really good chance. They have 3 teams legitimately who could win a title in Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. I think those are all legit national title contenders. You can make arguments for any of them in different ways. So I will be really excited, to see what happens in the playoff when we get there. Now the regular season is over. To get All right, my thing buffered for a second, but I think we're good now. And Scooby, I was not sure what the deal is with that, but yeah, I was curious about it. And then Scooby, I told you guys in our group chat, Patricia's going to be a good DC. Yeah, you were right, man. Matt Patricia is not just a good defensive coordinator, he is a great defensive coordinator. I mean, you can make an argument that he's the best, that Ohio State lost Jim Knowles and replaced him with a better defensive coordinator. I think you can absolutely say that. Max, OSU, IU, longest active win streak between two teams. Will that end? I hope not. Yeah, no, Ohio State has had Indiana because most people had Indiana because Indiana was the worst team in the program in the Big Ten for the last, before Signetti got here, for the last 15 years before that. And probably for the last 15 years before that, but I didn't study those 15 years as closely. Indiana was the worst team in the Big Ten. They were winning not 35% of their conference games, 35% of their games total. I mean, they were absolutely the dregs, but now they have the alignment. They've got the university behind them. They have some NIL money. They have some Mark Cuban money a little bit, and they're doing some things, and they're doing great things. And right now they have a chance to win not just a Big Ten title for the first time since 1967, but potentially their first national title for the first time in a really long time. If ever. Has Indiana ever won a college football national title? I realize I don't know. I don't actually know. But regardless, if they were able to do that, it would be the greatest Cinderella story in the modern history of college football, full stop. I mean, no question about it. That said, Ohio State looks like the best team in the country. I mean, they look absolutely amazing. They're clicking on all cylinders. It's a team that, if you take away the amazing defense and then they have an offense with Julian Sayin completing 80+% of his passes and Jeremiah Smith as the best wide receiver in the country and one of the greatest college wide receivers we've ever seen. One of the most impressive physically, certainly. And then Carnell Tate, who is a top 5 wide receiver in the country also, along with Jeremiah Smith. So you've got that going. I mean, you have absolutely everything you could possibly want. And, the lines of scrimmage are great, are really great. Like, fantastic. So Ohio State has everything you could want. I think if you're going to make the argument that Ohio State is going to lose, that Indiana is going to beat Ohio State, then I think the argument is that Fernando Mendoza is the Heisman winner, is the best quarterback in America, that he's going to put Indiana on his back with Elijah Surratt at his top, that nobody can cover Elijah Surratt, that Fernando Mendoza can throw anybody open, and that he's just going to do that and carry him. Max says Sayin finished at 78.9%, highest regular season completion percentage ever. I mean, amazing. And it's not like they were all safe throws, It's not like he was throwing just a bunch of checkdowns. Julian Sayin's throwing the ball down the field. He's throwing it up the seam. He's throwing, deep corner route, deep comebacks and posts and fly. He's throwing it down the field. So that's really impressive. I mean, I can't say enough about Julian Sayin. I don't know. I don't know who's better, Julian Sayin or Fernando Mendoza. I think we're going to find out. On Saturday and the Big Ten title game. That'll be really exciting. We will do a podcast dedicated to prepping for that for sure. And yeah, like I said, this Ohio State team, I don't know what more I can say. I don't think they're just a great team. I think they're an all-time great team. I think we're going to look back in 5 or 10 or 20 years and say, oh my God, the 2025-26 Ohio State Buckeyes were one of the best college football teams I ever saw in my whole life. I truly believe that that's the kind of team they are. Now, it doesn't mean for sure they're going to win the national title. Somebody could trip them up. It could happen. Could be an injury. A lot of things could happen. But right now, at their peak, with their guys healthy, more or less, I think this Ohio State team is as good as anybody I've ever seen. Max, do you think the winner of the title game gets the Heisman? Yes, I do, Max. Yes, I do. And you look at it, Marcel Reed at Texas A&M just lost to Texas in his rivalry game. So he's probably out based on that. I mean, like, I don't think he's got a shot. He was, questionable, but anyway. Yeah, Julian Sand and Fernando Mendoza are on the two best teams of the season thus far. They have been the two best quarterbacks in the country. They are putting up unbelievable stat lines. They have wide receivers who are seemingly always open. And, you've got Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper on one side. You've got Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate on the other. I mean, you've got a lot. You got a lot going on. So it's Scooby says, yes, I believe it. And I do think that whoever battles out, the only way I think it's not like that is if, like, let's say Ohio State wins the game, but they score on like defense or special teams, right? So Ohio State wins the game, but Fernando Mendoza puts up the bigger stats. I could see him winning the Heisman then, if that happened. I am not saying that's what I think is going to happen, but I think if you're going to make an argument that Fernando Mendoza loses the game but wins the Heisman, that's what it is. Otherwise, I am saying that, the winner of the Big Ten title game, that quarterback is going to win the Heisman. Yes, I do believe that. IU Robert, welcome to the chat, man. Good to see you as always. Says, looking forward to the battle between Sayan and Mendoza sitting all the way up in the 600 level. My biggest concern is how will the offensive line of Indiana do against that front seven of Ohio State? And I think that's a big question. Indiana's been so much better on the offensive line this year than they were last year. I mean, exponentially better. They nailed it in the portal. They got the Notre Dame guy. They got some other people. They've been really great up front. But this Ohio State team, again, up front, I don't think they're just great. I think they're historically great. Max in the chat has said before that he thinks Arvell Reese is the greatest Buckeye linebacker he's ever seen. Ever. That's tough. It's tough to run on a team like that. I think it's going to be hard for Indiana to run the ball. And because of that, it's going to be on Fernando Mendoza, man. It's going to be all on him to see if he can get the job done. And I think he's up for it. I think he is. I think he's as good as it gets in college football. Mendoza is. I'm not saying I think Indiana's going to win. I haven't made my pick yet. I will make my pick in the preview pod on Tuesday. So I'm still thinking about it. I'm still weighing things, trying to figure out who I think is going to win. But I think Mendoza's ready for a challenge like that. I do. Scooby has been to the game. So yeah, Robert's going to the game. So Robert, hope you have a lot of fun at the title game. Scooby said he's been there before for other times, so that's a lot of fun as well. And Max Klatt said Reese is the best parts of Parsons and Abdul Carter combined. Well, that is high praise from Joel Klatt. And I think Joel Klatt is very good at what he does. I think he's good at breaking down scheme. I think he's a highlight. I don't think he's a great. I don't love listening to him talk a lot, like in a podcast format. But when he's just talking scheme or talking ball, talking individual players, I think he's really good. So yeah, I think that's high praise. And yeah, Reese is, oh man, he's special. So yeah, definitely, Robert, have fun at that game. It's gonna be special. Like I said, this brings me to my next point. The SEC and ESPN sucks. And the college football media sucks. Because here's what I'm going to say. If the number 1 and number 2 teams were SEC teams, and they were playing in the SEC title game, number 1 versus number 2, the entire college football media, especially ESPN, would be calling it the game of the year. No, not the game of the year, the game of the decade. You know what? Not even the game of the decade. They'd be calling it the game of the century. Number 1 versus number 2 for a title game. The last time this happened in the Big Ten, it was 2006, and it was number 1 Ohio State and number 2 Michigan. And they called it the game of the century. And there was a lot of belief that the loser, that those two teams would be rematched to play for the national title. Just as a lot of people think now, Indiana and Ohio State will have a rematch to play for the national title. But instead of this game being endlessly hyped up as the amazing 1 versus 2 for a conference title and for the number 1 slot in the playoff draw, instead of hyping that up as the biggest game that's ever happened, instead of saying, oh my God, here we go, number 1 versus number 2, this is as good as it gets, this is championship college football, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, Ohio State and Indiana are playing, and well, they're both gonna make, get a bye anyway, so who cares? Who cares? Well, for one, it depends. If you're the 1 seed, it's one thing. If you're the 4 seed, that's a different thing. It's better to be the 1 seed. So that's one thing. But like, what do you mean, who cares? We have number 1 versus number 2 in the entire country in the same conference playing for a title, both undefeated. How does it get any better than that in college football? That is as good as it gets for a conference championship game. That's as good as it gets. And the fact that it's not being hyped up like a big game, it's because it's a couple things. 1, because it's not the SEC. If it was 2 SEC teams, it'd be hyped up. And 2, because Indiana isn't considered a sexy brand yet. It's just not considered a big brand. And because of that, nobody cares. And it pisses me off. Legitimately pisses me off. Because this is a huge game. Indiana, Ohio State both earned their way into be a game that should be considered one of the games of the decade. Absolutely game of the decade contender going into it. Now, who knows what happens? Maybe it's a blowout. Maybe it's not a great game, whatever. But going into it, conference title game, the Big Ten in the nation's best conference, the number 1 team versus the number 2 team. This is as good as it gets in college football. Robert says, who wants to see Georgia and Alabama again with all that's going on in the Big Ten title game? Game day is being really stupid. Game day isn't being stupid. They're being selfish. They're promoting the SEC because that's where their financial interest is. And they're doing that at the expense of being honest about the sport and what's most important to the sport. So game day, I'm really disappointed in game day for doing that. Absolutely. It's not cool. Scooby says parity is awesome. Yeah, it is. It is awesome, Scooby. We see, teams can rise up, teams can fall down, programs can, a lot can happen all the time. So yeah, it is, it's a big deal. And I'm going to be really excited about the conference title game when we get there. I agree with everybody in the chat. Conference title games are really fun. And, and if your team makes it there, I mean, that's a dream come true. So to all the Ohio State and Indiana fans out there watching, I'd say enjoy this week. Enjoy it. Because your team earned it. You earned it here. And you get to, walk up to this, one of the great college football games, potentially, of the decade. Number 1 versus number 2 for the Big Ten title. That's awesome. That's as good as it gets. So get excited about that. I'm really pumped about it. And yeah, and that's so Ohio State and Michigan will still go to a good bowl game, but they do not make the playoff. Sharon Moore, I think Sharon Moore, it's a prove it year next year. I think next year Sharon Moore is either going to make the playoff or he's going to get fired. Because they have everybody back. Bryce Underwood will be a sophomore next year. He won't be a freshman anymore. And it'll be year 3. I think Sharon Moore will have next year to make the playoff, or else they will go their separate ways and Michigan will find somebody else. So I think it's a prove it year for Sharon Moore going into next year because they lost that game to Ohio State and did not make the playoff this year. Scooby, should we talk about Lane Kiffin and what should be comparable in the big? Yeah, we can talk Lane Kiffin. So Lane Kiffin, the head coach of Ole Miss, who has now led Ole Miss potentially, looks like, to making the college football playoff, is going to be the next head coach at LSU for the LSU Tigers. He's leaving Ole Miss behind, and he offered apparently to coach the team through the playoff, but Ole Miss said no. And look, I get it. They want to protect their players, not get them poached, whatever. But I think you sign some sort of agreement about that and then be real. Like, the coach who got you there is the best one who's going to take you on a playoff run. I think Ole Miss is making a huge mistake not letting Lane Kiffin coach the playoff. In the chat, I'm curious what you think, but I just think, with another coach, the odds of them making noise in the playoff are much lower, I think. So I'd be letting Lane coach in the playoff, even though he kind of screwed you over. That would be my thought about it. But I'm curious what everybody else in the chat thinks. What do you think about the Lane Kiffin? I think it's kind of scandalous. I think it's too bad. Like, I wish he would have stayed at Ole Miss. I think he had a good thing there. He might live to regret leaving, just like Brian Kelly lived to regret leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU. He might regret leaving Ole Miss to go out to LSU, because it's just not forgiving. And if you have one or two bad years as LSU's head coach, you are getting fired, period. And that's the way it is. Friend of the pod, Patrick, in the chat. Patrick, good to see you, man. How are you doing tonight? Did you get to watch Brosmer today? I did not. I kept tabs on it, but I had a bunch of errands and whatnot I had to get done today. So I did not get to watch Brosmer. I know they didn't score. And I saw he threw some interceptions. So I'm going to guess it didn't go great. But, man, just think, 2 years ago, Max Brosmer was the quarterback at New Hampshire. And he parlayed that into a job as the quarterback for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And he parlayed an awesome performance doing that into now he started a professional football game. And I don't know if he's going to make it long term. Maybe as a backup, he might. He could have a big career. He could not. But, like, regardless, to go from being an FCS player to a starting NFL quarterback is something they can never take away from him. And it's an amazing achievement from where he was to where he's gotten to. Prammer Warrior in the chat said, I'd let Kiffin go for the playoff because his focus isn't on Ole Miss. Now, that's fair. That's a fair argument, Prammer. And to say that Kiffin, if you're thinking he's going to be focused on recruiting and on his new roster and all that stuff, so you need someone else who's focused. I don't know who's going to scheme up plays as well as Lane Kiffin, who's on staff. Lane Kiffin is kind of a savant at that stuff, So without him, I don't know. I don't know how that goes. Scooby says, odds of them making the playoff is low, but it's horrible for him to leave during the season. Yeah, it's horrible for Kiffin to leave during the season. And, like, what would be comparable in the Big Ten? I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of what a comparable thing would be in the Big Ten, and I can't even imagine, like, what could happen that would even approach that. I can't actually picture that happening in the Big Ten. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't, but I'm trying to picture it happening in the Big Ten, and I don't think it does, because, the coaches usually get paid and stay. But Lane Kiffin has always thought of himself, I think, as like a Nick Saban, as an Urban Meyer, as like a national championship winning kind of coach. And I think he thinks, and is probably true, that it's a lot easier to win a national title at LSU than it is at Ole Miss. I mean, it is better in-state recruiting. It is, you have more infrastructure. You do have advantages at LSU that you don't have at Ole Miss. You do have a little more money to work with, all that kind of stuff. Robert, a comparable thing would have been Cignetti leaving for Penn State. So glad that didn't happen. Yeah, totally. If Cignetti had just said, I used my IU run to get another job, then that would have been the same thing as Kiffin leaving, for sure. All right. Yeah, Patrick, highest of highs on Saturday to the lowest of lows today, watching Max and the rest of the Vikes. Yeah, that's rough. I'm kind of glad I missed the Vikings game, because it did sound like it was kind of a bummer. It just didn't go well. But Since you brought it up, let's talk a little bit about the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe. Everybody was picking Wisconsin to win this game. Everybody was picking Wisconsin to win this game. The line started out in Minnesota's favor. It quickly, all the betting money came in on Wisconsin. All the college football analysts were putting their money on Wisconsin. They were leaving the Gophers for dead. They were writing PJ Fleck off. And what happens every time you write PJ Fleck off? Every time you think PJ Fleck is done. You think his squad has quit. When he's back against the wall, he gets wins, man. He gets wins. And Minnesota played really well yesterday. I was thoroughly impressed. I know the offensive stats don't look amazing, but I got to stress that it snowed throughout the entire game. From hours and hours before the game, through the game and after the game. So it was hard to play offense. It's hard. People are slipping around, losing their footing. The ball's wet, makes it harder to catch, stuff like that in the throw. I thought Minnesota really brought it yesterday, especially defensively. I mean, other than the one blown coverage, which set up the Wisconsin touchdown, which was first ruled not a touchdown. We all celebrated because it was a 4th down stop. And then they reviewed the play and they said it was a touchdown, and you went into half and Minnesota's only up 10-7. And I'm thinking, oh man, have we lost the momentum? Is this going to be a thing where in the second half they don't have it? But Minnesota, credit Fleck, credit the staff. They came out of half and absolutely dominated defensively. Wisconsin did not score after halftime. Minnesota was able to move the ball when they needed to. Their punter, Tom Weston, played fantastic. Scooby said, well, yeah, Wisconsin upset 2 nationally ranked teams at home. I was worried we would regress back to the mean. Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin and that's the thing. Wisconsin was really hot going into the game. Wisconsin had beaten both Washington and Illinois, 2 very good Big Ten teams this year. And they looked, like they'd really improved. And everyone thought Wisconsin, most people thought Wisconsin was going to win. But I had a feeling. Prammer Warrior says Fleck's a good coach. Yeah, Fleck's a great coach. And I had a feeling with his back against the wall, facing a potentially long offseason if he lost, PJ Fleck would come through and win. And with this win, Minnesota now has won Paul Bunyan's axe 2 years in a row, 4 years out of the last 5. 4 out of 5. So in the last 5 shots at the axe, Minnesota has an 80% winning percentage. I mean, that is flipping a rivalry on its head. That is taking control of a series. And PJ Fleck has done that. And he has taken it from Minnesota, which has been behind in the series for a long time or not a long time, but for a little bit of time that was behind in the series. And he's flipped it on its head. And once again, Minnesota leads the all-time series. 64 wins to 63 losses and 8 ties. What Fleck has done at Minnesota, I think, is kind of epitomized by the Wisconsin series. And the fact that Minnesota now looks at Wisconsin as a game they expect to win. Not a game they might win, not a game they're hoping to win if things work out, but a game they expect to win on the schedule. And it's returned the rivalry to it. When Wisconsin went on a big run and it wasn't very competitive, there wasn't a lot of juice in the rivalry, but now there's juice. Now people are amped up. The crowds are crazy every year for it. A lot of people are watching on TV. I mean, a lot of people are interested. The Minnesota-Wisconsin rivalry is one of the great rivalries in college football, and the Minnesota Golden Gophers are privileged to be a part of it. I mean, it is the most played rivalry in major conference football. IU Robert, did Smith get hurt? Surprised seeing Simmons in there late. I am not sure about Smith's status there. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I didn't, being at the game, I wasn't privy to what was being said on TV, and I haven't had a chance. I'm going to go back and rewatch it probably tomorrow, but I haven't had a chance to go rewatch it on TV, so I haven't had a chance to do that. Scooby, though, is a great Wisconsin expert, says Smith isn't a great passer. He's a true freshman. So, yeah, sounds like just different QBs, different roles, that kind of thing, Robert, is what was going on. But I got to tell you, from Minnesota's perspective, man, going 7-5 is a big deal because that's not a great record, but you win your biggest rivalry game to end the year. And on top of that, Minnesota, for the first time in a long time, goes undefeated at home. And it was a young team, and that's what happens with young teams, right? Minnesota had a young team with a freshman quarterback. They looked great at home at times. They looked bad on the road at times. Really bad on the road. And it wasn't happening. But sometimes when you have a young team, that's what you get. And that's the kind of learning curve you have. And that's sort of the reality of it. But it was, I got to talk about, in the stadium, it was such a vibe. It was so loud last night at the Minnesota game. The crowd was so into it. The student section was just amazing. I mean, they were there so early and loud and boisterous. And before the game, the Wisconsin players came over and tried to taunt the student section. And I thought, oh, man, they're not going to let them forget it. They're not going to let them forget it. And they didn't. They gave them no quarter. You could see Wisconsin having a hard time communicating out there at times. Absolutely, due to the noise, due to the environment. Minnesota, it's really fun. It's a whole vibe. You go to a fun Big Ten game, any rivalry game, but you go to a Minnesota game, home game these days, and it's a good time. It's a really good time. Crowd's engaged. They're into it. The product on the field's pretty good. You get that win. It was glorious. So I had a lot of fun at the game, and it was, if you were a Minnesota fan out there, let me know how you felt about it. And yeah, your thoughts on it. Minnesota finishes also, again, for the fourth time in 5 years, Minnesota finishes with a winning record in the Big Ten Conference. And that's, every year you get 7 to 9 teams with winning Big Ten records about. So it's about half or a little under half of teams have winning records. And Minnesota has been one of those top half teams 4 out of the last 5 years. And I guess 4 out of the last 5, and I guess 5 out of the last 6, I want to say. So that's really impressive. Or no, 5 out of the last 7, I want to say. But yeah, 4 out of the last 5, 5 out of the last 7. There we go. That's that sounds right. Prammer Warrior says Malachi Coleman's extremely talented. I'm surprised he's not receiving more PT for Minnesota. So yeah, that's really interesting. Coleman is really talented. So Prammer, the rumor with that is that Coleman is really good at going down the field and going up and making big contested catches and running fast and leaping, but that he hasn't always been good at the nuance of running precise routes. So I think for him to become a starter next year and a bigger contributor, I think what you need to see from him is more consistency in his route running. And I think when he adds that piece, sky's the limit for Malachi Coleman. I mean, physically, he's a freak. So if he can also become a route runner, look out. That guy's going to be unbelievable. So yeah, all the snow, that gave it a vibe too. I mean, when the game ended, the fireworks went off to celebrate the victory. And of course, the PA announcer played Jump Around to troll the Wisconsin fans, and everybody jumped around. And it was a vibe. It was a great time. It was a really fun time watching Big Ten football. And that's why I love rivalry week. And because you get those games that are hard fought and you want them so bad. And when you win, it's just that catharsis. And you lose, it's devastating. And that's the thing, we care, right? We care about college football. That's why those games are the way they are. So we can go on and talk about other stuff, though, as well. And and not trying to just talk about Minnesota, Wisconsin, of course, but it was a big win for the Gophers. Yeah, they finished 5-4 in the Big Ten, undefeated at home. So it wasn't a perfect season. It wasn't the season I wanted the Gophers to have, but they had a lot of success doing it, and that's pretty exciting. Let's run through some of these other rivalry games quickly as well too. We had the number 6 Oregon Ducks 26, the Washington Huskies 14. That was a hard fought, a little bit of a slugfest. It was never really close though. It was, I guess it was 13-7 Oregon at half. So Washington was within a score. But then Oregon scored in the third quarter to go up a couple scores, and then they remained up a couple scores. So Washington, once again, plays good defense. Washington has their moments and has things they do really well offensively. It was good to see Denzel Boston playing, although he didn't do a ton, but he did. He had a couple touchdowns, but he didn't have a lot of yards or anything. But again, it was just, a lot of these games, there was snow, there was sleet. Not in this one, but there was weather. And people weren't that efficient offensively this week. And that's what happens. You get late in the year when it gets really cold, the offensive chances, you convert fewer of them. So each specific one becomes more important. Scooby, have a great night, y'all. I got to get up early for the airport for a customer this week. Yeah, Scooby, thanks for joining us, man. I hope you have a great night. Nittany Nation Mish, welcome, man. Good to see you. He says, what are your thoughts on the Kalani Sitake spoke to Penn State? Oh, man. Kalani Sitake to Penn State. Now, that would be really interesting. That would be really, really, really interesting. Sitake, he's had a very successful career. Spent a lot of time at BYU, and was there from 2016 through the present moment. Has had a lot of success, seemed like a perfect fit there. But obviously, you can win a lot more games at Penn State than you can win at BYU. And if this guy who's been really successful at BYU, who's had 4 10-plus win seasons at BYU in the last 6 years, 6 years, 4 10-plus win seasons, maybe he is a great call. He's not a guy I would have ever thought of to go to Penn State, but maybe he's a great call. Maybe he is an under the radar candidate. Maybe he's exactly who you should be looking at, a guy who's taken a program that has a lot fewer resources than Penn State does and has absolutely just won and found a way to get, some of the really amazing college players to go play for him. So, yeah, good culture guy. I don't know. The thing is, at BYU, it's such a specific culture. You always wonder if guys can translate outside of that. Like, how will they look to recruits who aren't looking for what BYU does, which is a lot different than what most colleges are offering, both from a social aspect and from an educational aspect and all of that stuff. It's just very different. So you wonder how a guy like that translates. But if you're saying, here's a guy who does more with less, what can he do with more? I think it's a really intriguing possibility. Kalani Sitake at Penn State. That would be a fascinating hire. I'll tell you what, going back to Oregon, Washington. Oregon's the team you don't want to play in the college football playoff. They are 11-1. They are not playing for a Big Ten title, so they get a week to rest, an extra week to rest. And, they're playing as well as almost anybody on both sides of the ball. Maybe not as well as Ohio State. No one's playing as well as Ohio State, but they're playing as well as anybody else. I don't think, with Dante Moore doing what he's doing, I don't think anybody wants to play Oregon in the playoff at all. I don't think I would not want to take on the Ducks right now. They are ready to go. They are rocking. I mean, it's coming. It's coming with Oregon for sure. Down the pipe, no question about it. What do you all think about Kalani? If in the chat, curious, what do you think about Kalani Sitake to Penn State? My take is it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of brilliant. I if they make that hire, it's possible it could just be perfect. And he could hit the ground running and it could be flawless. And it's also possible it's a total disaster. I just don't know. Would be really excited to see it. Super excited to see it. All right. Other results. We had the number 17 USC Trojans, 29, UCLA 10. I mean, USC, they didn't make the playoff, but they went 9-3. Mission accomplished. I think that was the expectation, that they would have an improved season this year. 9-3 is absolutely an improved season. They were in the playoff hunt. I mean, I don't think you can hate on USC for that at all. I think that's Lincoln Riley gets a lot of credit. They've taken a step up. Their recruiting's only improving. USC is a program headed in the right direction. No question about it. Nittany Nation Mish says, I'm fine with the culture issue as DeBoer is from across the country from Alabama. Yeah, agreed. You don't need to share a culture to be, Nick Saban's from Ohio and spent most of his career in the South. Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the right coach who can connect with players, who has the right scheme and can hire the right coaches and all that kind of stuff. That's truly what matters when it comes to that. But yeah, USC is another one. They could be tough in a bowl game. They could be real tough. I don't think anyone's going to want to play USC in a bowl game. They score a lot of points and they have guys who are coming back next year, a lot of them. So, although Makai Lemon, he might opt out. We'll see what happens with him, but it's been really fun watching USC improve this year. Good for them for taking a big step. It'll be interesting to see, where they get to next year. We already talked about Minnesota 17, Wisconsin 7, which is absolutely just a huge program win for PJ Fleck. Huge program win for PJ Fleck. Still have a chance to win 8 games. 8 wins, 8-5 is not the season you wanted to have, but like it's not a bad season either. It's a season where you did all right. You did some good things, enough good things to outweigh the bad things. So still a lot on the table for the Gophers. And like I said, it was a borderline religious experience at Huntington Bank Stadium yesterday in the snow, with people just so, and because it was snowing the whole time, nobody sat down. Everybody stood up. And when everyone stands up, everyone participates. So the crowd level, which is normally really high, was even just higher. It just was. It was wild. Nittany Nation Mish, USC versus Texas in the Citrus Bowl would be a must watch. Oh man, would it ever? Would it ever? Can you imagine if USC beat Texas in a bowl game? We would never let the SEC forget it ever. Ever. Not after the way they hype Arch Manning. If he lost 2 games to Big Ten teams in a calendar in his first year starting, oh, chef's kiss. Perfect. Just perfect. Love it. Prammer Warrior, all the Big Ten teams will be tough in the bowl games and the playoffs. Yeah, I agree, Prammer. I think the Big Ten is going to have a great postseason. I've already said I think Ohio State's going to win the national title. I think Oregon and Indiana are prime for big playoff runs. And I think you go down the bowl list. I think you got a lot of teams playing their best ball, playing some of their best ball right now. I think you got a USC, you got a Washington, Illinois might have a chance to get healthy. They've been really injured. So they did get out the win against Northwestern, but they've been injured of late. They have some time to potentially get healthy for a bowl game. Minnesota's playing, just played really well against Wisconsin and has time to, further get healthy. Penn State made a bowl game now. I mean, so that's a team that's, playing at such a higher level than they were earlier in the season. So yeah, I think the Big Ten is going to do awesome in bowl season. I really do. Best defenses. Yep, Prammer, absolutely. Big Ten has the best defenses in the country, no question about it. Nittany Nation Mish, I hope Penn State doesn't have a million opt-outs. Man, me too. Me too. I always hate when there's opt-outs. But I will say when you get opt-outs, you get to see how deep your team is. And you get to see what your younger players, how good they are. So, like, I don't like opt-outs, but, like, when both teams have a bunch of opt-outs, it's still, the game still counts, is what I'm saying. You know, SEC teams will try to say, oh, our 3 best players didn't play, so it doesn't count. I'll be like, yeah, but the other team's 6 best players didn't play, and they whooped your butt anyway. They whooped you. So I don't want to hear the opt-out excuse from anybody. But yes, I agree, Nittany. I hope Penn State doesn't have a million opt-outs. I hope guys decide to play. Because it's, you know, you only get one chance to play college football. Play as much of it as you can. And those bowl games, you can get some swag and whatnot these days that are pretty good. So for most of these guys are not going to the NFL anyway. So you might as well play. That kind of thing. That is for sure. All right. Penn State 40, Rutgers 36. I didn't get a chance to watch this game live. I'm going to go back and check it out more. But, I mean, what a back and forth game. What a battle. You know, 24-21 at half, and then close all the way through with Penn State scoring right at the end. I mean, Katron Allen, 226 yards rushing. That is, I mean, take a bow, man. Take a bow. That is as good as it gets. What a performance. You know, for him to play, you know, for him to have the year he's had when they've been so disappointing as a team, but him individually to have this kind of year, you got to give it up for him. You absolutely have to. I mean, what a gutsy, impressive performance. Prammer, Dylan Raiola is gone. He's probably going to Oregon. Oh, man. Does that mean Dante Moore is going pro? Dylan Raiola is going to Oregon. That means Dante Moore must be going pro, which you'd think Dante Moore would come back for one more year if he knew what was good for him. But I guess he could go pro and still get drafted pretty high. So that'll be interesting. And yeah, Nittany, Katron Allen almost broke the PSU single game rushing record. Yeah, I mean, 226 yards, 10.3 yards a carry. And Nicholas Singleton at 86 on 9.6 combined for 3 touchdowns. Each had a run over 50 yards. I mean, that's doing it. That's doing it up. But give it up for Rutgers also. Ethan Kaliak-Manis, 338 yards on 15 yards an attempt. Woo! I can't even hoot properly. 3 touchdowns, no picks. My voice is gone, everybody. I mean, like, I screamed so loudly on every defensive snap of that game yesterday. My voice is just torched. David West Designs, is Dante eligible? Yeah, I think he's a redshirt sophomore, David West. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so I think he would be eligible. But it just seems like for his own good, you know, quarterbacks generally do better in the pros if they get more starts in college. That's like been proven statistically over time. So I guess it would surprise me if Dylan Raiola was willing to go. And yeah, Dylan Raiola wouldn't win the job at Oregon. I mean, David, that's the other thing. Would he? I mean, not for sure. Dylan Raiola is a very good player, but he can't really move. He's not mobile. And so is he, you know, he's got to fit in a particular kind of offense for it to work. I'm surprised it's not working at Nebraska. I'm surprised Dylan Raiola is leaving at all, potentially. Like, that seems crazy to me. They put so much into him. They built the whole roster around him, and now he's just going to go. It just seems wild to me. Prammer says, what about Emmett Johnson? Yeah, man, he can play. That's he's a great player. I don't know. I mean, I think he's going pro at this point. I think he's 4 years out, but I'd have to double check that. Don't quote me on that because I'm just not sure on him and whether he's at a point to go pro or not. But yeah, he had a fantastic season. I mean, his stock will probably never be higher. It's probably worth it for him to go now if he could. Nittany Nation Mish, Rutgers 6'6" wide receiver KJ Duff is a cheat code. Yeah, man. I mean, you got KJ Duff and you got Ian Strong at Rutgers. I mean, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, those guys are just, you know, those guys are just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And KJ Duff, 127 yards and a touchdown, long of 42. I mean, just getting it done. Antoine Raymond, though, 100, not to be outdone, 189 yards rushing for Rutgers. So, absolutely monster job there. You gotta give it up. But Penn State got it done. Give them all the credit in the world for staying with it. They could have quit. They didn't, and now they're going to a bowl game. And I hope the Penn State players play in it. I hope they enjoy it. Like that's what college football is for. That's what life is for. Like, have a good time. Emmett Johnson's stats versus Iowa. Look at his season stats, 217 versus Iowa. There's some great backs in the Big Ten. Yeah, great backs in the Big Ten. Phenomenal running backs in the Big Ten always, every year, and this year is no exception. Nittany Nation, Rutgers is the best 5-7 Big Ten team I have ever seen. They got so much NFL talent in that offense. Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of guys are going to play in the NFL, and if Ethan doesn't make the NFL, he's at least going to make the CFL, kind of thing. So, yeah, I agree. Rutgers, a really impressive offensive team. It's just too bad that Rob Smith defense was so bad that even with a great offense, they're not going to a bowl game. It's not happening. So, Northwestern came back down to earth against a team that's not Minnesota, as I knew they would, because Preston Stone isn't actually that good. The Gophers just had 1 million blown coverages. So, don't worry, I'm not bitter at all about that one and playing the worst defensive game we played since Rob Smith was our defensive coordinator. And that's how bad it was against Northwestern. I'm grateful for the performance Minnesota had yesterday. But, as great as it was, as high as I am, as happy as I am Gopher fans, there's no question that defensive coordinator Danny Smith needs to be demoted. He can still be the safeties coach, but he cannot be the guy calling the plays anymore and deciding on the scheme. He just can't. He can't. Defense played heroically yesterday. And let's talk from Minnesota. Oh, man, John Nestor. Did I mention him already? Yeah, I may have. But the 3 turnovers, the 9 tackles, and he's a cornerback, including a 60-yard interception return. I mean, that guy became a all-time great Gopher yesterday in his performance in the Axe game. I could wax poetic about John Nestor. 2 interceptions, one of them returned 60 yards, recovers a fumble, 9 tackles. 9 of them. And, man, I got to tell you, when the game was officially over, when Aiden Gooseby made the hit on 4th down to separate the Wisconsin wide receiver from the ball and just lit him up like a Christmas tree, the whole stadium just lost it. It was pandemonium. Just pandemonium. And, yeah, John Nestor became a Gopher legend. I mean, he's still got another year. I'm excited to see what he does, but he's a great number 1 cornerback. A great, legit number 1 cornerback, and there aren't a lot of number 1 cornerbacks who look like John Nestor, so good for him. Good for him for having just a monster game and, kind of putting that defense, just saying whenever they needed a big play, he was going to make the big play. And he just did it. Did it and balled out. So, last reaction, Michigan State 38, Maryland 28. Man, I was all ready to say that this was showed that Michigan State was still a competitive team and they turned a little bit of a corner and that Jonathan Smith, maybe he rejiggers his staff and goes into next year and things go better. And then they fired him and they hired Pat Fitzgerald. And now Pat Fitzgerald is the coach of the Michigan State Spartans going forward. And it's all crazy to me because I just don't think you fire a coach after 2 years. I just don't. Not unless it's so bad that there's no question that he's cooked. Because when you just keep firing coaches, you never have a complete roster with a complete idea. A coach has a vision for a roster and he recruits to that vision and tries to put it out there. When you keep switching coaches, then you have a bunch of pieces who were recruited to different visions and they don't always fit together. And that makes it hard to win. So that's why I think it's crazy to keep just firing coaches over and over. Yeah, Nittany Nation Mish. Jonathan Smith getting fired after that performance is hilarious. Yeah. What was the point? They switched quarterbacks and started playing better and got through the tough times and turned a corner on defense and Michigan State was absolutely playing better ball as the year went on than they were playing at the beginning of the year, and they fired him anyway. Like, what is that? What good is that? I'm surprised Pat Fitzgerald must be desperate for a job, because the way Sparty fires coaches, he better know, I better win right now. Because if he doesn't win in 2 years, they'll fire him too. So Fitzgerald better get results right away. Or else he's going to be the next coach fired by Michigan State. Because I'm not convinced there's anyone at Michigan State who knows what they're doing. I'm not convinced. We'll see. Maybe they're right. Maybe this will be different. They'll support Fitzgerald. They'll get behind him, whatever. But based on how the Jonathan Smith tenure has gone, I'm not convinced there are any adults in the room at Michigan State making decisions. Yeah, Nittany Nation, the MSU jobs at the bottom of the Big Ten, says they fire everyone. Yeah, they just fire everybody. Just fire. That's their answer to everything. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they're devaluing what is a very good Big Ten job by the way they just casually fire everybody. I'm with you entirely. Any other thoughts everybody has about rivalry weekend? We'll do the full review on John and I will do it on Tuesday, but this is just kind of my initial thoughts on every game. And yeah, I waxed poetic a little bit about Minnesota, Wisconsin, because it was glorious. It was glorious. It's why you love college football. There's nothing like winning a big rivalry game. Nothing like it. Nothing like winning the last game of the year. Those are just great feelings. Great feelings. And especially when that last game's a home game, feels real good. Over under 3 years till Pat Fitzgerald gets fired. Nittany Nation. I'm going to say push. I'm going to say he wins just enough in year 2 to get a year 3, and then they fire him after year 3. Because I don't think Michigan State is a serious program right now, and how they're supporting. The expectations are so far past what the resources are. They're so far past what the resources are that I don't think they're a serious program right now. So I don't think Pat Fitzgerald, if Pat Fitzgerald succeeds, it'll prove how great a coach he is, because I don't think he's in a position to have great success. That's not how I'm seeing it break down anyway. Exactly. When you keep firing coaches, that goes into the money you can pay for NIL, that goes into the money you can pay for recruiting, that goes into the money that you have to pay for everything. It's a problem. Awesome. Did I mention the Minnesota won Paul Bunyan's axe? Did I mention that yet? I'm pretty happy about it. All right. An awesome rivalry week in the Big Ten. The Big Ten enters the postseason, I think, as a commenter said, in a great position to dominate. I think not just in the playoff, but also in the bowl games. I think the Big Ten is set up to succeed in a really big way. And I think there's going to be no question coming out of this season who the best conference was. I think we're going to see it in the playoff results. I think we're going to see it in the bowl game results. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if we have an all Big Ten national title game with Ohio. With some combination with 2 of the following 3, Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana, in no particular order. Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. I think we could easily have a national title game with 2 of those teams in it. Wouldn't surprise me. And I want to see it. I want to see Paul Feinbaum's head explode. Lose his mind at the thought of an all Big Ten national title game. I would, just please let it happen. Let it happen. It would be so funny. David West Design says, axe. Yeah, David, we got the axe. We did. Sky Uma, row the boat, go Gophers. They beat Wisconsin. They sent them back to Madison, sent them packing. Let them know who's in charge of the rivalry. Let them know. Let them know. And they did it, and it was awesome. And I can't. So excited about it. I'm pumped. Like I said, my voice is gone. I can barely talk right now. But I am beyond pumped at what happened yesterday and happy with all the decisions I made on the way to seeing that game. Nittany Nation, I want to see Alabama lose on a drop snap or something. Oh, that'd be so funny. If Alabama loses the SEC title game, that would be truly hilarious. Yeah, I'm with you. It would be too funny. Lose on a drop snap. Yeah, something ugly. Something's just stupid. Not like a great football play, but just something dumb, just a mistake. Yeah, I'd love to see the Big Ten championship game defined by excellence and the SEC championship game defined by dumb plays. Does Alabama miss the playoff if they don't win? Yeah, they're out because they'd have 3 losses, and including the conference title game. So I'm pretty sure Alabama's out if they don't win. I'd be shocked if they somehow got in if they did win. That wouldn't seem reasonable to me. Right on. Well, I appreciate everyone, all of you. I had an awesome Thanksgiving. I hope you all did too. Thinking about what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful tonight that all of you came and hung out with me on an impromptu live stream. So thank you for coming and hanging out and kicking in and commenting. I really appreciate all of you. It's been a lot of fun doing this tonight. We will do we're not gonna be able to go live for the review pod or the preview pod on Tuesday, but we will put them both out on Tuesday. So those will be available for you to do. And I will probably go live after. In fact, no, I will go live after the Big Ten title game to talk about the winner, the loser, the playoff, and bowl season. Talk about all that stuff. So get ready for those 2 podcasts, the Rivalry Week review and the Rivalry Week preview to come out on Tuesday. Absolutely check those out. And then I will go live again. Only this time I'll be planned and we'll promote it. I'll go live after the Big Ten title game. So we'll put that out on the podcast Twitter. So you'll all see that this week too. I'll put it out in advance so everyone has the link. So yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. Yeah, Nittany Nation. I think I mentioned this already, but I already said it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure for me. Thank you so much. This has been great. I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. It's Sunday evening. I hope you have a great week coming out of this holiday weekend and that your holiday started off in a joyful manner. I know mine did. So all of you take care, and I will see you in the next one.